What's going on, guys, and welcome to episode 507 here today of #AskGSM for Wednesday, August 16th, 2023. I am Graham GSM Matthews. Hope you guys are doing well and having a great week so far. If you want to send in a question to the show, you could do so by tweeting me on the Twitter machine at WrestleRant with the #AskGSM. Find me on Facebook as well, facebook.com/Graham.GSM.Matthews. Drop a comment on the post I usually put up on Tuesday nights, if not in the wall itself. And last but certainly not least, drop your question down below in the comment section on this very video. I'll include your question in next week's edition. Let's get right into it, starting with the YouTube questions. Micah does it from YouTube. Their first question was, if the Gun Club left AEW for WWE, do you think they could be bigger stars being the sons of Billy Gunn? WWE seems to love second-generation wrestlers, Cody Rhodes, Charlotte Flair, Randy Orton, Dominic Mysterio. They also just signed Brian Pillman Jr. Should the Guns jump from AEW to WWE? Most definitely not. Now, I don't know how they would fare in WWE. They would probably get a good run in NXT just because they don't have a lot of teams in NXT, a lot of interesting teams. I'm not a Gunn guy, personally. I like Billy Gunn. The Gunn sons themselves have improved. They're a lot better as heels. They've become more interesting and entertaining lately. I've never really been, personally, the biggest proponent of the Gunns, that being Austin and Colton Gunn, whatever. I don't think they're really worth the push that AEW has given them as former tag team champions. They're just not on the same level as a lot of the other teams that AEW has. Now, that being said, I do commend their effort for attempting to showcase the team, pushing the team, trying something new with the team, because a lot of the other teams in AEW that have gotten pushes have been teams elsewhere, like the Lucha Bros, the Young Bucks, the Hardys. There aren't a lot of, there are a decent amount of original teams in AEW, but not a lot that have gotten over at the level of being tag team champions. Like Jurassic Express, I believe, was a new team for AEW, was it not? Maybe they were already a team pre-AEW. I don't remember. Luchasaurus and Jack Perry, Jungle Boy. I don't remember, but like Santana and Ortiz, SCU. I already mentioned the Lucha Bros, Red Dragon. They were never AEW tag team champions, but they were in the mix for a while. The Bucks I already mentioned, FTR. A lot of these teams were already teams elsewhere. Best Friends, again, not former AEW tag team champions, but they've been around forever. The Dark Order, I think, was already a thing pre-AEW with Evil Uno and Stu Grayson. There aren't a lot of original teams. Now, the Guns were never, I don't think, a team anywhere else but AEW, at least not on a major scale in a major promotion like Impact or WWE or whatever. They've built up something organic with them, and again, they're not the best team AEW has by a wide margin, not by a long shot, but to their credit, they have gotten over, and they have found their footing as part of this whole Bullet Club Gold thing with Juice Robinson, Jay White, and they're more entertaining now than they have ever been in their AEW run so far. So, I'm not really sure why they would leave unless WWE was just offering way more money than what they're making right now in AEW. But Tony Khan seems pretty high on the Guns, pushing the guys, giving them consistent television time. Former tag team champions alongside a very talented star in Jay White. They've kind of hitched their wagon to them as part of that group. So I'm not really sure why they would leave. So the answer is no. They should not leave AEW to WWE. That just wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. They would probably get lost in the shuffle in WWE, if anything. Again, they're not that great of a team anyway. I just don't think they'd be in the mix for the tag team titles, either in NXT or even, especially the main roster, for much longer than a month or two. I just feel like WWE has other teams I'd rather see pushed and focused on before the Guns, and the Guns just fit AEW, and their father is a fucking producer there, so that's probably going to work in their favor more than anything. His second question, what is one movie that you wish got a sequel but didn't? The ever asked question, not really just to me, but just in general. I honestly don't really know. I'm sure there are examples, but at the same time, every friggin' movie nowadays has either been remade or made a sequel to. It could have been years later, and it sucked. And it doesn't ruin the original, but it waters it down ever so slightly. I feel like nowadays it's better, it's more important to not make a sequel than to make a sequel. Because if something's so successful, it's like, oh, we made so much money off the first one, we got to make a second one. Then it's never really as good. Very rarely is it as good as the original. The movie, I was always surprised. You said one movie that I wish got a sequel but didn't. Not a lot of examples come to mind. But one movie I always thought was just insane they never made a sequel to, because it did make a lot of money, and it's a cult Christmas favorite, 20 years later. And it did come out 20 years ago, I think this year, which is wild to think about. Elf. I don't know if I was ever clamoring for a sequel, but in years that followed, I always thought to myself, I thought it was weird they never made a sequel to Elf. Now, what it would be about, I don't know. I mean, they kind of completed the story with the first one, as they do with a lot of movies, and then they added the lore and add on an extra character or a story that isn't necessary. It probably would not have been as good anyway. I always wanted the sequel to Dodgeball too. That wasn't a Will Ferrell movie. That was a Vince Vaughn movie with Ben Stiller. I think in '04. And I think they're finally making a sequel now. They announced a couple of months ago, which sounds just fucking awful. Because it came out 20 years ago, and if you watch that first one, it's great. They do make a lot of off-color jokes that you would not be able to make today, and understandably so. And that was part of the, not appeal, but part of the charm of that first movie. I just don't think a second Dodgeball movie works in 2023, 2024, whenever it's going to come out. With Elf, I don't think that would work either if they made a sequel 20 years later. So I don't really have any other examples of a movie like, oh man, I really wanted the sequel. I mean, I'm sure there are examples, but nothing really comes to mind personally. His third question, what should WWE do to get Candace LeRae over with the audience? I mean, consistent television time, booking, and storytelling would help. I mean, that really goes with any woman on that roster. If you feature someone enough, not like an all-time important program, like I'm not saying she should be feuding with, Trish Stratus or whatever, but Zoe Stark, to her credit, has gotten over. She was someone from NXT. Honestly, of all the women they've called up or brought back to the company in the last year, she was someone I probably least expected to succeed, not because she's not talented, but because I saw more potential in Candice LeRae or in Tegan Knox or anyone else that, again, they've either brought up or brought back to the company in the last year. Zoe's a great hand, but she wasn't all that interesting in NXT until she turned heel. Now, she wasn't even one of my favorite characters at that point either, but she was more interesting. And then they've brought her up to the main roster in the last couple of months. They gave her the vignette treatment. They gave her consistent wins. They paired her with Trish Stratus. She's worked with Becky Lynch. Now, that feud hasn't been overly great anyway, but Zoe Stark comes out and she's gotten more mic time. She's gotten good ring time. She's beaten Becky Lynch before. Like, they have booked her practically perfectly for someone at her level. She's easily been the best call-up of this, of the crop of competitors they've called up since the draft from NXT, and they called up a lot of people. A lot of people aren't even on the fucking show. JD McDonough is only now getting Raw television time as part of the Judgment Day stuff. Previously, he was not. He was barely on Raw in the last couple of months. I guess they were just holding off on him until the right time came in the storyline, I guess. I don't know. But Zoe has gotten over. Now, with Candace, they could have had her feud with Rhea Ripley. I mean, they're kind of doing something with her and Rhea now, but Rhea's already over, so working with her could get her over more. I just think Candace is great. They could give her a real chance. They just haven't yet. She was getting some TV time when she was first brought back a year ago. But at the same time, though, it was an unimportant match as she was working with other women that were also not over. The matches weren't standout matches by any means. She would get the occasional 10-minute match with Dakota Kai, but beating Dakota Kai didn't really mean anything because Damage Control sucked, as far as the booking was concerned anyway. Dakota's a great wrestler, but their booking was not really at a level where they were over yet at that point when Candace was first brought into the company. They brought her back with a whole crop of women who were also not over with the main roster audience. So, again, they were headed it seemed like in the right direction when they started airing vignettes for her and a video package promoting who she was, what she was all about. That was like 2 or 3 months ago. They haven't done anything with this woman since then. She was in a fucking tag team turmoil match a couple of weeks ago that she lost, and she was on Raw a week or two ago these past couple of weeks, feuding with Rhea, attacking Rhea, whatever. And that's fine, but we know she's going to get squashed by Rhea. She's really just a sacrificial lamb for Rhea Ripley to beat before Rhea moves on to her kill. I don't know. I just feel like, again, they have a lot of women that are not over, and that's part of the issue. But at the same time, I do feel like Candace is talented enough to get over at a significant level if they put her on the show consistently. Have her doing stuff of note and not just out there to lose to any given person that they need to give someone a win to that week. And, develop a character, more mic time, more, let us find out more about her, like we did in NXT. So, I don't know. Even in NXT, she was branded as Johnny Gargano's wife for the longest time, but she did get over through her own merit, through matches and feuds and storytelling and character development. We need more of that with her on the main roster. And that same thing can be said for a lot of the women on Raw and SmackDown. They're just not really putting the effort in right now. No L from Facebook. Do you think it's time for Damian Priest to break away from the Judgment Day? There will come a time where that happens. I don't think it's right this second. I mean, I think they do need to get to the next chapter of this, I almost said Bloodline, the Judgment Day storyline. It's basically the Bloodline storyline of Monday nights is the Judgment Day, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It has carried the show since the draft. I love the Judgment Day. I wouldn't break them up in their current version, in their current iteration. At the same time, though, they kind of have to go in that direction, because Damian Priest has the briefcase. I don't think, and I want him to cash in successfully. I don't think he wins the World Heavyweight Championship as part of the group, and it stays that way. I don't think he wins the World Championship and Balor isn't jealous. I don't think he should get kicked out like Randy Orton Evolution style, which I think happened 19 years ago today, by the way, which is wild. I'm pretty sure they can have him win, and then he can break off on his own. I think he could break off on his own. I think that's doable, and it won't make him look like a loser for getting betrayed by his own group. Like, he can leave on his own. He can make the choice to leave Judgment Day, and you could do a feud between him and Balor, which might be coming soon. I don't know. So, I mean, you could do it shortly and have him be replaced by JD McDonough, which is a step down. I like McDonough. I think he's a perfect fit for the group. Replacing, like, their heavy, so to speak, with McDonough when he's a lot smaller than Priest, and they already have two smaller guys in Dominic and Finn. It's just not the same dynamic. But there will come a time, probably not this second, probably in the next month or two, where Damian will have to branch off on his own. They can't keep playing on the Judgment Day tension forever. It can't be a year-long storyline. We do need to get to the next chapter of this story at some point soon, and it probably will be that. Him breaking off on his own, doing his own thing, and maybe going babyface, and hopefully cashing in on a world championship successfully. So, yeah, I would like to see that, but probably not right this instant, because there is a little bit more story to tell now that JD McDonough is getting involved with the group on a weekly basis on Raw. His second question, what would be your top 3 WWE moments in Canada? I feel like the only three answers you can really give to this, I mean, the first one is interchangeable, I guess, but, and I'm a WWE historian to a certain degree, but I can't tell you every major moment that's ever happened in Canada and WWE. But I feel like the 3 that come to mind are these. Ultimate Warrior beating Hulk Hogan for the WWE and Intercontinental Championships, the winner-take-all match in the main event of WrestleMania 6. One of the best WrestleMania main events. Maybe not like top 5 ever, but it isn't that conversation. It's a great match. Regardless of what your thoughts are towards Warrior and Hogan, it's a memorable main event in Mania history. A great match, one of the best matches of both guys' careers, and a great moment for Warrior. So I got to go that one for Mania 6. Another Mania moment with Hogan and Rock from WrestleMania 18. Again, it's more of a match than a moment, but just Rock and Hogan standing there as the crowd's going wild. They're looking out into the audience. Also in Canada, Toronto specifically, from Mania 18 and 02. And then the last one, Canadian Stampede. Really the whole pay-per-view, but the main event with the entrances, with each member of the Hart Foundation getting a louder reaction than the last. Just a magical moment at Canadian Stampede. Such a great show. I rewatched the back, because that was in Montreal, I believe, as well. I rewatched that back earlier this year, because it was right before Elimination Chamber, before I was there for that pay-per-view. And such a great match. So, Canadian Stampede, the main event, Hogan and Rock from Mania 18, and Warrior and Hogan from Mania 6. At Iwagu91 from Twitter, their first question was, do you suppose Maxine Dupri will join Imperium or stay with Alpha Academy? I think there could be a scenario where Ludwig kind of makes her fall for him, and she turns on Chad, costing him the championship. It would have to take a little bit more than a couple of weeks. Like, the match is happening next week. Maybe they have a rematch, and that's where the turn happens. They have 2 matches, and Gable loses in both. That's possible. If it were to happen as soon as Monday, I just feel like he hasn't attempted to, scout her enough for it to happen on Monday. That might be a bit too soon, because that's when Gunther and Gable is happening for the Intercontinental Championship. Ultimately, though, what I wouldn't mind seeing is Maxine turning on Alpha, costing Chad the championship by joining up with Kaiser, and then Kaiser just dumps her anyway. And maybe she goes heel, maybe she feels bad, who knows, but I don't think she needs to be a part of the group. Like, she just doesn't fit the vibe of Imperium to me. I guess she could be with Kaiser, maybe it would exceed expectations. I just don't think Imperium needs a female member, and she's already gotten over with Alpha Academy, so I probably, realistically, ideally, would not turn her at all. Just because she's gotten so over in this role as a babyface, why throw that away by just having her join Alpha, or rather by having her join Imperium? I just feel like that'd be silly. So no, I don't think she'll join Imperium. Even if she were to, I just feel like that's a weird fit. And the only purpose that would serve would be to cost Chad the championship so he's not losing clean. And if that's not the purpose, then I probably wouldn't do it. Second question, what are your expectations of All In? I do expect it to be a great show. I mean, listen, the card's coming together nicely. I'm glad they're not waiting until the final week. They will have to announce matches tonight on Dynamite and very likely next week in the final Dynamite before All In. But it is shaping up to be a very historical show. Now, they are billing it now as the biggest event in wrestling history, which in a way it is in terms of attendance. It doesn't feel like it for a lot of people. I've seen a lot of people who are even going to this thing saying it doesn't feel like All In is on the horizon because they really haven't made it feel like as big of a deal as it should be. That's just AEW trying to do All Out at the same time, doing all these other shows at the same time. We got Fight for the Fallen tonight. They did Blood and Guts a couple of weeks ago. They're trying to do a lot of different things at the same time. But they have built up a very compelling card for that show. A lot of the bigger matches, Bucks and FTR, MJF and Cole, Joe and Punk. Those to me are the attractions of that event. Sting and Darby against Swerve and AR Fox is a nice mid-card matchup attraction as well in that coffin match that they're doing. So I do expect it to be a great show. I wish the build was better. I wish they started the build of the event earlier. And I have no doubt, though, they will deliver a great show in a couple of weeks on that Sunday. Just because, I mean, how can it not be with a crowd like that? When you have a crowd that big, how do you not have a special show, if only for the crowd reaction? So regardless of how the matches go and the outcomes and whatnot, it should be an electric atmosphere in, I almost said Canada, in England nonetheless. I'm getting my cities mixed up here. Canada too. Canada's a great crowd as always as well, but the England shows, there's a lot of shows I remember for the crowd alone and not even necessarily the matches. I feel like Backlash will go down on a list from earlier this year. In a couple of years from now, I don't feel like a lot of people will remember a lot of what the card was beyond Bad Bunny and Damian Priest, but they will remember that crowd. All In will probably have more memorable matches than Backlash did earlier this year, but it might be one of those circumstances where the crowd overshadowed the event itself, and that's fine. As long as it's a great, fun show, sometimes that's all that matters. His last question here, your current thoughts on AEW Collision. I love the show. I really do think it's a great alternative to an alternative in Dynamite. Dynamite's supposed to be the alternative to WWE. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Dynamite, especially lately in the last year or two, has been very hit or miss. But Collision, again, it's only been 2 months, but Collision so far has been a great alternative to Dynamite. The pacing, the talent featured, the storytelling, the commentary team, really everything. Everything that Collision does feels a lot different than Dynamite. It's still the same guy running it. It's still Tony Khan making all the decisions, mapping everything out. It's not a completely different person in charge, but it feels like it's someone different just because the pacing is so different than Dynamite. Dynamite feels like Crash TV where it's like, all right, this is over, right on to the next thing, VTR for 10 seconds, commercial, picture-in-picture, match, promo, blah, blah, blah. Collision, they give stuff more time to breathe, which is one element of the show I really, really like and appreciate. And they've kept that consistent so far with the show since mid-June. Punk being featured, Punk being kind of the star of the show is cool. That's coming from a Punk guy myself, but still, his issues we'll talk about momentarily, the behind-the-scenes stuff anyway, from a couple of days ago from over the weekend. Punk being featured is cool. We got more Ricky Starks on the show. Andrade, House of Black, who we were barely seeing on Dynamite for the last year or so. They were barely on the show. Now we're seeing a lot more of them on Collision, which is great. Longer matches, FTR really bringing a new focus and attention, kind of a renewal, a rejuvenated focus on the tag team division on Collision between the FTR and Bullet Club Gold matches, the matches they had with Cole and MJF, Big Bill and Brian Cage, and did they not just have a match on Saturday? Or no, it was a 6-man with them and Punk against House of Black. But still, they've been a big part of Collision's success as well. The ratings reflect that, not just with them, but with really everyone. They're not doing over 1 million viewers by any means, but they did almost 700,000 viewers for that July show headlined by MJF and Cole. They're not going to do those numbers every week. I don't know what the numbers were for this past week's episode. I know the SummerSlam show that went opposite of SummerSlam did like 300,000, but again, that was a WWE pay-per-view night. And that's a problem too. WWE does pay-per-views once a month, and all of those shows are going to be, I don't know, it's a problem because they're going to run into that issue monthly where, SummerSlam's an exception because it's such a big show. But will the ratings dip when we have a Payback or a No Mercy, not a No Mercy, or a Fastlane or whatever the fuck they're doing in October for the main roster? Probably. How much, I don't know. But overall, though, I am really loving Collision. I've said this before. It is probably my favorite weekly wrestling show right now in terms of what they're doing with it, which is great. And I hope it continues. And as a cheap plug, I do review the show most Sundays here on the channel. Some weeks I don't. I was away for SummerSlam weekend, so I couldn't do it that week of, not this past week, but the week before that. Probably won't be doing it next week on the day of All In. But overall, though, I typically do Collision reviews here on the channel every Sunday, so check those out when you get a chance. At Reborn Again, John Ritland from the Twitter Machine, and on YouTube, Real Honesty with John Ritland. Check out his work. He does awesome content. His first question was, what are the chances that WWE has Gunther lose the Intercontinental Championship next week, despite being so close to breaking the record? I don't want to say it's impossible, because it's WWE we're talking about here. More than any other company does WWE do surprising things for the sake of fucking surprising people. Whether it's the right or wrong call, I mean, they've made less wrong calls, arguably, this past year with Triple H seemingly in charge of creative. I can't even really say that anymore with Vince being back. But you never know. Look at Roman and Cody. I thought Cody winning at Mania was a slam dunk, and he lost. This is not the same thing. But I could see them having him break the reign, not break the record. I could see them having Gable break the reign, just because, honestly, just to surprise people they weren't expecting it. Blah blah blah. It'd be a great underdog moment. I love Gable. I really do. I actually do want to see him as Intercontinental Champion after Gunther breaks the record. I mean, we're so fucking close. And here's my thing, I said this with Roman, if Roman's going to beat Drew and Sammy in their hometowns, then surely he has to lose to Cody, and he didn't. I thought that was a mistake. I still think that's a mistake. With Gunther, my logic is this. If they had him as champion for so long, there weren't a lot of people along the way I thought should have beaten Gunther for the championship. I did not want Drew beating him. I did not want, even Matt Riddle. I mean, Matt Riddle would have been fine, but, fucking Moss or Nakamura, people like that. I didn't want any of those people beating him for the championship. Ricochet, Braun Strowman. I did want Sheamus beating him for the title. I thought the time to do it would have been WrestleMania. And I said at that point, before that pay-per-view, if they're going to have Gunther retain that championship that night, he needs to break the record to make this worthwhile. Because if he doesn't, he should have just lost the championship at WrestleMania. The last 5 months have produced great matches, but he really could have lost it back in April to Sheamus at WrestleMania in that triple threat with Drew, or just one-on-one or whatever. So I feel like he will beat Gable next week. He will break the record, but having him lose it before then is very much a possibility. WWE is in record-breaking mode right now. Not in terms of their own stuff, but in terms of, we want to break all the records. Roman's breaking records, Bianca's breaking records, or she broke records as the women's champion, the longest reigning women's champion of the modern era, they said. They had the Usos break records. They had the Usos break records as the tag team champions. So I feel like Gunther will be no different. We've come so close. Why end it now? He's had an amazing run. But hopefully Gable does get a run with it after he does break the record, maybe the week after or whatever. If not Sheamus. I don't know how you get to Sheamus with Sheamus being on SmackDown, but that's still something I would stupidly want to see at some point, because I just feel like it makes a lot of sense for him to be the one, more than anyone else on that roster, to be the one to beat Gunther for that championship. His second question, with the impending merger with Endeavor coming up, could you see a restructuring of numerous contracts for wrestlers by the middle of next year? I could see some talents leaving over money if Endeavor does to WWE what they've done to UFC. I haven't really thought about that, but it's very possible. If they don't have the same amount of money coming in and whatnot, then they may not be willing to offer the same amount of money they have to superstars so far, whether it comes to new talent or whether it comes to renewal of contracts or whatever it might be. I feel like that could be an issue for WWE in the future. I mean, I know Lacey Evans just announced that she was leaving WWE. I don't think she's a victim of that. I mean, it's not like she's a big star and they don't have anything for her to. It's not like she's a big star with nothing to do, or they're just not willing to pay her more money. I mean, why would she be worth more money? They've done absolutely nothing with her, and she just isn't that much of a priority. So, who gives a shit? It's not like Drew McIntyre, for example, that could be a problem, where so far it seems like he has not re-signed. And come the renewal of his contract, and we've heard these rumors already this year, where they're not really offering what he's looking for, I would lock down Drew to whatever he wants. And he doesn't seem like an unreasonable person. He has helped carry this company through the pandemic and beyond these last couple of years. To not give the guy what he's looking for, Drew McIntyre of all people, we're not talking about fucking Hulk Hogan here, seems pretty ridiculous. In the fact that they have the Endeavor deal coming up and they want to, cut cost and cut down on stuff might be a factor. It's probably a pretty big factor. So Drew might be the first victim of that, where they're not offering him a bigger contract or the same contract or whatever, and he might leave because of it. I still think he ends up in WWE. He ends up staying in WWE, but there is a chance he leaves if he doesn't get what he wants out of this next deal that he signs with WWE. So yeah, that is very possible. I don't know who else that would affect. Again, whether it be new talent. I mean, it's seemingly, I don't know if it's connected, but the whole supposed hiring freeze, which did feel like a real thing because they hired 0 people as far as talent is concerned, even new prospects at the PC. They didn't do any, I think they did tryouts over Mania weekend. I don't know how many of those people they signed. If they did sign them, it was kept quiet. Usually WWE promotes that stuff. I don't think they've really hired a whole lot of people this year at all. I mean, reportedly they've signed Carlito and Brian Pillman Jr., so it might be over this whole hiring freeze they had. But even if they did have one, it lasted a good 6 months, and that's very unlike WWE to not be hiring a single person. But it coincided with Vince being back and the whole Endeavor deal happening and whatnot, so I'm not surprised. But that is something to keep an eye on going forward. They could be losing talent if they're not offering them the same amount of money they were previously, or when it comes to new people coming in from like AEW or elsewhere. So, yeah, that's a great point. His last question here, non-wrestling related. I know you've asked about movies, or I've asked about movies, he says, a few times this year, but are there any standouts released this year that you feel didn't get enough attention from people? I mean, you watch a lot more movies than I do, John, as far as like movies that people probably would not be thinking of that, that deserve more attention. I'm more of like a blockbuster person, so like whatever's out in theaters, if people are saying it's great, I probably agree. I know you didn't like Oppenheimer. I did like Oppenheimer. That wasn't one of my even top 5 favorite movies of the year, but I did enjoy the movie. All the movies that you probably saw that people liked, I probably liked as well. As far as movies that people weren't talking about as much, again, I'm not a big like indie movie type person unless I saw it on streaming and no one was watching it, whatever. That doesn't happen often though. Like for example, I would say my top 5 movies of the year, in no particular order, were all like critically acclaimed. So that's why I can't really say, oh, well, this movie didn't get enough attention. Guardians was beloved. I mean, I loved Guardians 3. That was an amazing film. Definitely my number 1 for the year as far as my favorite movies. I loved the Super Mario movie. I thought that was a lot of fun from back in April. Even the Barbie movie that came out a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if I said that here on the show yet. We talked about it before it came out, but that was a fantastic movie. A lot better, honestly, than I thought it would be. But again, those are all critically acclaimed. I liked Fast X a lot. I thought that was a great flick. I thought, again, a lot better than I thought it would be. And I also thought John Wick 4 was an amazing movie as well from back in March. I've seen a lot of good movies this year. But I feel like all the movies I just mentioned were already being talked about, and they weren't like underrated by any means. And a lot of the movies I have seen that I liked that weren't great probably don't deserve the critical acclaim anyway. There's a lot of movies I just haven't had a chance to see yet, but like the big blockbusters, I've seen most of them this year. So we'll see what happens in the remainder of 2023. Next question from Bill Meister, 88. His first question was, are you excited for the potential DIY reunion that Ciampa teased with Chelsea Green this week? I didn't see that. So I know that Ciampa like tweeted a video. I didn't watch the video. I saw that he just tweeted asking people where Johnny Gargano was, which is what we're all fucking wondering. I am pumped for it. I mean, this should have happened a while ago. I don't know where Johnny is. I thought he wasn't hurt. He's been wrestling at house shows. No one really knows what the fuck is going on with Johnny Gargano. But yes, they need more teams. WWE has a healthy amount of teams right now between Raw and SmackDown, even with some teams being hurt. They do have a lot of good teams. DIY is the team that they need. DIY should be the team to take the titles off of Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. Gargano ain't doing shit. They're not going to focus on him clearly on his own. The way stuff fell through, seemingly. That was never made official, but that was kind of hinted at by several people, so I guess that's over with. Candace and Indy might do their own thing, but it doesn't look like they'll be linking up with Dexter and Johnny. I don't know. But putting Johnny with Ciampa would make a lot of sense. They can have a run of the tag team titles at some point. Yeah, so Ciampa ain't really doing much of anything right now on his own, and Ciampa's great, so I feel like it would be the best use of both guys right now on the main roster is putting them back together as part of DIY. We haven't seen that DIY run yet on the main roster, and this could be it. So I hope we get it. Next question. Saw a post today, also from Bill, by the way. He said, saw a post today asking what was the greatest insult promo The Rock ever did. What do you think your favorite is? Mine would be either the Vicky Guerrero song or Before Armageddon 2000. There's a lot. The Vicky one was funny I think you're talking about the Rock concert from 2003. The Rock concert in Toronto where it goes, hey, yay, Toronto. Like, that whole thing is just amazing. You can find any video on YouTube, and I would probably say any of those, to be honest. The one where where he made fun of the Big Show, the one where he made fun of Rikishi is also a classic between RJ and I. I did it for The Rock. I did it. Oh, shut up, you thong-wearing fatty. Like, that's such a great one. That and the Rock concert, I don't know if it's really an insult, but the one where he was going to leave WWE the night after WrestleMania 19, where Goldberg debuted. That whole promo, that whole segment's great. Really, honestly, any promo from The Rock's from that Hollywood Rock phase, he had some good ones when he came back in 2011, 2012, and 2013. There were some good ones in there as well. Boots to Ass is caught on quickly. The promo we cut on Cena, like he did a Facebook promo on Cena, video, whatever. It was a promo that he cut through Facebook that Punk aired on Raw during their contract signing, I think, before SummerSlam 2011. I always liked that one. They're very juvenile, a lot of juvenile insults, but I just enjoyed those videos and the promos he was cutting on Cena at that point. When he came back in 2011 and they were doing the promo battles and stuff, him and Cena, those were great as well. So really any of them, but honestly probably anything from that Hollywood Rock period in 2003. Short-lived, but it was magical. His third question, with the reports of CM Punk falling out with Jack Perry and Ryan Nemeth, is there truth to them? And if so, is he showing that his ego causes too much issues with Tony Khan, or rather that Tony Khan cannot handle? So I don't think there was a falling out with Jack Perry. I think the report on paper sounded exaggerated, but I saw Fightful follow up and say that it was like something that Perry wanted to do. I don't know, I didn't read the full report, but from what it sounds like, Perry went to a Collision taping and wanted to do something so he wouldn't have to go to work the next week, and Punk wasn't happy with that. Or he wanted to do something in his pre-tape or his promo or his segment that Punk wasn't in favor of, and he was speaking up as a veteran as saying just, hey, you probably shouldn't do that. It sounds like they're fine, though. It sounds like Punk likes Perry and he just wants to help, and it wasn't like a heated argument. The Ryan Nemeth thing, Punk just doesn't fucking like Ryan Nemeth. I mean, there's a difference, though, honestly. I'm not saying it makes it right, but there's a difference on the totem pole between Jack Perry being banned from Collision tapings and fucking Ryan Nemeth. Now, the Matt Hardy thing I hear is unrelated. Daniels may have been, bumped off the Collision stuff, and that's likely because, or I think the report even was from a few different outlets, that Christopher Daniels was involved, obviously, in the brawl, and he broke up that brawl between the Bucks and Punk back, in September of last year. And Punk feels, well, if Ace Steel can't be here, then Christopher Daniels can't be either. I mean, one guy bit a guy. It's not exactly the same thing. Daniels did not. That's kind of fucking dumb. But the Ryan Nemeth thing, I mean, it sounds like there might be more to it. I'm not taking Punk's side here. It is kind of dumb to ban people from tapings. It's fucking Ryan Nemeth. What the hell could he possibly be doing at the Collision tapings? I guess beyond Ring of Honor. That's probably what it is. Or wrestling in the fucking dark match. I guess. But I guess he had tweeted something about Punk that Punk did not appreciate when Punk came back and did his promo in mid-June. And then I guess he also didn't go around saying hi to Punk when Nemeth went around to the Talon Hotel saying hi to everyone but Punk and the people that Punk was with, and Punk didn't appreciate that. So it's just like stupid old school business crap where like, oh, you got to shake hands with everyone. That's such like an old school WWE mentality. The respecting, like, I just thought that was dumb. I don't really give a shit about Ryan Nemeth, so it doesn't really make much of a difference to me. I don't think, the falling out with Nemeth is, it is legit. All this stuff that's being reported is definitely true. I don't think it might be exaggerated, but I don't think it's untrue. The Adam Page stuff is really where I take a problem with, really where I have a problem with what Punk's doing right now. The banning Nemeth from Collision stuff is just, it's fucking Ryan Nemeth. Who gives a shit? The Adam Page stuff is questionable. Not saying it didn't happen, but apparently what happened was he made those comments about Page after Collision went off the air last week, and he realized that they came off wrong, or I don't know. He wasn't happy with how they came off. And then he apologized to him afterward. Now, why the fuck would he even make those comments anyway, unless he was shooting for a match with the Elite or with Adam Page? And Adam Page clearly does not want to work with him. It just seems desperate. It just seems desperate for him to be making those comments, apologizing. Like, you could have avoided all of that by not saying anything at all. Why dig that crap back up? Like, I love Punk, but that just seems silly. It just seems stupid. So, the stuff reported on is definitely legit. I believe every word of it. And Punk's part of the problem, but Tony Khan should not have created an issue where he's like, oh, we'll just keep Punk on one show and the Elite on another and then just completely bury the problem. No, they got to get these people in the same room, get over their issues, be willing, maybe not be willing to work together, because that was a pretty, the fact that they brawled backstage and shit, they might not want to make matters worse by putting that on TV. At some point they should, I think, that they really want to make money off it. If they wait too long, people may not care anymore. It probably won't be as, hot of an issue come a year or two from now. But anyway, with Punk and the Elite, I mean, that's part of the Tony Khan problem as well. I mean, the Tony Khan should have alleviated that issue a long time ago, and it's still a problem. And he should be telling Punk, listen, I don't care what this guy tweeted about you, you need to get the fuck over it. And he's not going to, because he wants to be friends with everyone. This is a problem that Tony Khan has had for a long time. He is as much of the issue as CM Punk is, because that guy's the boss. If he really wants to put an end to this crap, he should step in and say, listen, Punk, you're not banning anyone from the taping, regardless of whether they shook your fucking hand or not. That's just stupid. I don't care about Ryan Nemeth, but that is pretty dumb. On that same note, at noob_n_co-tv, their first question was, do you think it was a mistake for AEW to have signed CM Punk? Don't get me wrong, I've been a fan of his since 2006, but ever since he came to AEW, I was hoping he wasn't repeating the same problems he had in WWE, but it looks like it's deja vu all over again. I mean, it didn't really honestly sound like he had any problems until just last year. Until, he came back from the injury. I mean, that's not true, actually. The first inkling of an issue with Punk and AEW was when that whole Adam Page shoot promo happened on Dynamite right before Double or Nothing in 2022. Before that, though, it didn't seem like, I'm not saying it was all perfect, but it didn't sound like they had a lot of issues with Punk or Punk was creating any drama prior to that point. And Punk isn't entirely to blame for that. The Elite are to blame as well as Tony Khan for not squashing the beef earlier between the two sides. And everyone else that has since gotten involved and whatnot. No, I don't think it was a mistake for AEW to sign CM Punk. He's done them a lot of good. He made them a lot of money off pay-per-view buys and ratings. He's the whole reason why they have Collision. Honestly, if they didn't have CM Punk, they probably would not have been able to have sold the idea of Collision. I know the higher-ups at Warner Media wanted another show for AEW. I know that. They have said that. But at the same time, I feel like they did sign on for it because they wanted Punk aboard. They were going to do the show anyway, I think. And I'm not saying the show would have failed without Punk. Punk isn't this massive ratings draw that some people make him out to be. He is a draw, but not that much of a draw. Let's be honest here, if we look at the numbers. If he was that much of a draw, they would not have done 300,000 people for that SummerSlam show, the same night of SummerSlam. They would have done a little bit higher than that. But anyway, they put him on that second Rampage. They did great ratings and whatnot. So Punk has been an asset to them from a business standpoint specifically, from a talent locker room perspective. He has helped a lot of people, and people have spoke up about that. People like Powerhouse Hobbs, among others, backstage, FTR. He's been a guiding hand for a lot of people. He's helped a lot of people with promos. You don't really hear about that stuff as much, but there were articles being done on that as far as the positive impact Punk had in the locker room when he first came in and that first year. But again, it's all about the negative now, so people don't really talk about that. Now, I don't think it was a mistake, but you can't avoid these issues by having, again, like I just said, Tony Khan stepping in and saying, listen, you guys got to get over yourselves. You got to get over yourselves. You guys got to either work together, stop spreading bullshit. That goes for the Elite and CM Punk. CM Punk seems to be more the problem at this point because he's bringing shit back up in promos after the show's over. That's part of the problem as well. Tony Khan has to step in. It's not the fact that they have CM Punk is the problem. I was surprised he was even brought back, to be honest with you, after the shit that went down late last year. I'm glad he's back. He's been a big part of Collision. He's a great part of Collision. At the same time, though, they can avoid some of these issues by just saying, listen, you need to fucking stop. You need to stop bringing up Adam Page. If you do this again, I'm going to suspend you again for 30, 60 days, whatever it might be. I mean, he's got to stop. He's got to just let it go and not bring it up again. It's dumb. If they're not going to work together anytime soon, he has to stop bringing it up because people are going to think it's a work. And it's not. But if he's out there apologizing to Page for comments he should not have made in the first place, he probably shouldn't have said them to begin with. So no, having Punk is not the problem, but they do have to limit down on the drama and the bullshit from everyone involved, specifically Punk, by having Tony Khan actually step in and say something and put his foot down, which so far it doesn't seem like he really has. Their next question, what are your thoughts on Asuka's tweets shooting on not only Stardom, but also the Japanese media? I believe wrestling fans need to stop telling Asuka to go back to Japan. It's getting annoying and Asuka's in a better place here in WWE. I did see some of those tweets. I don't really understand any of them. I mean, I can read them. I'm not saying like they're in Japanese, I can't understand them. I don't understand them because I don't know the drama there. Apparently, before she did leave the WWE, a lot of like media outlets were against her, or there was like a lot of people in Stardom who didn't like her or something. I really don't know. I honestly don't really know what that issue is about. She's been tweeting a lot about it, though, for the last couple of days, so I feel like I know a lot more about it now than I did originally, which is to say I knew nothing at all. But yeah, no, she shouldn't go back to Japan. Listen, I've said about Asuka before. You ask about Asuka a lot, and I've said this. She has had a great career in WWE. She just became the WWE Women's Champion a couple of months ago, and she had a very forgettable run, but no, Asuka's not going anywhere. I thought, I've said before, she should probably just leave. I'm not saying, go back to Japan to be booked better there. I mean, she's been booked great in WWE. She's never really been the guy or the girl, the woman, whatever, like as far as the face of that women's division. She always plays second fiddle to the four horsewomen and now Bianca and Rhea. She's never really been the focal point of any division. Aside from NXT 6-7 years ago, beyond that on the main roster, she has never been the focal point, and she never will be, but she plays her role well. She's great. They've given her a little bit of a makeover with the new makeup and whatnot, the new music, so that's been a breath of fresh air, I guess. And she's still great. I mean, she could still go out there and have great matches. It's not like she's too old or she needs to go, she's being buried, or she's taking opportunities away from the other women. Like, not at all. So I think Asuka is perfectly fine right where she is in WWE. I mean, she has done everything. I'm kind of bored of Asuka to a certain extent, but at the same time, I'm not saying she needs to quit the company or they need to fire her. That would be silly. She is an asset, certainly, to WWE in a lot of ways. His last question, your thoughts on Jey Uso quitting WWE? I don't think it's kayfabe, he says. I think Jey Uso might be on hiatus and come back either at least by Survivor Series or the Royal Rumble to start his feud with Jimmy Uso at WrestleMania 40. So you think that Jey Uso quitting is real, and that he's actually gone from the company until Survivor Series or the Rumble? No, that's certainly not real. He's definitely still with WWE. He will certainly be back. Certainly part of the storyline. This is their way of stretching out the story till WrestleMania. I said in a video on WrestleRant Radio with RJ a week ago, how do we stretch this out? I don't think they can. The Bloodline stuff for a lot of people, which I'll get to in a second, has already run thin. And I'll just answer this question now. At Kyle Rochelle 19, part of their question was, now that Jey Uso is so-called quit, is it safe to say that the Bloodline story is going in circles? I mean, it is to a certain extent. I feel like they peaked at Mania with Roman retaining, because Roman really should have lost there. They've had great segments in tension and bad blood with the Bloodline guys since then, with the Usos going babyface. Really, to me, where it jumped the shark was at SummerSlam, with Jimmy Uso going heel again, turning on his brother. The explanation was weak on SmackDown. It was not great logic. We're clearly headed for a four-way with the Bloodline, and that's great. But the issue is that Roman does not work these smaller shows, so you can't just do it at Payback. They're going to drag this out until the Royal Rumble or drag it out till WrestleMania. Roman should lose at WrestleMania to Cody Rhodes, no doubt about it. But the Jimmy and Jay stuff, I mean, I'm not against them having a match against each other, but I'm not really sure if that's the feud to carry SmackDown in the absence of Roman Reigns for the rest of the year. And Jey Uso, again, quote-unquote, quit anyway, so I'm not really sure what you have carry SmackDown in their absence. That's part of the problem when you put all your eggs in one basket and you have a lot of other storylines that just don't have that same juice, and SmackDown's going to lose a lot of momentum as a result. Regardless of what you think of the Bloodline stuff, it's dominated the Blue brand for a reason, because it is great storytelling, and they're the best and biggest thing going in WWE, specifically on SmackDown. When you take that away, what do you have? Not a lot. They have a great roster, don't get me wrong. They have a great roster on SmackDown. What I'm saying is, what have they really put creative attention toward getting over or making people care about? Not a lot. AJ and Cross, no one gives a shit. The women's stuff has gotten better. The division is in a much better place now, I think, than even a month or two ago, which is great. The mid-card belt, thank God Rey Mysterio won it, but Theory did a lot of damage to that championship. Not Theory himself, but the way he was booked. They have a lot of work to do on SmackDown to make other stuff not even as important, because that's just not going to happen, anywhere near as important as the Bloodline stuff. That's really what their focus should be on going forward. Jey Uso will be back. As far as the Jey Uso stuff, he will be back. Probably, I mean, I can't imagine he's gone for a month, more than a month. He'll probably be back before then. It could still be Jimmy and Jay at Payback. How they get there with Jay quitting, I don't know. If he just goes back on it a week from now and Jimmy lures him back to the company, that's just stupid. Like, then why even do it? I don't know. I feel like they're just trying to kill time as desperately as possible because they need to stretch this out even longer, because Roman's not working another show probably until Saudi. And if not at Saudi, if they're not doing a Saudi show, probably not until the Rumble, because it doesn't look like he's advertised for Survivor Series either. At Kyle Rochelle 19, the second part of their question, he said, when will Bobby Lashley face Roman? Whatever WWE is doing with him and the Street Profits, I'm interested. You're not the only one. What they're doing right now with the Profits and Lashley is great. We haven't seen a whole lot of it, but what they've done so far is intriguing. They definitely have my attention with that. As a new heel group on SmackDown, tweener group, whatever it might be, it's the most interesting, and I love the Profits, it's the most interesting they've been in years. And Lashley needed something to just keep him directionless as he's been for many, many months now. Has been a waste of Bobby Lashley. The guy is great. He can still contribute. And this is part of how he can do so. So, yeah, Bobby can face Roman at some point. I don't know if they want to sacrifice Bobby to Roman because he's not beating Roman. I would like to see him face Roman just because he beat Roman 5 years ago. Probably, I think, the last person to beat Roman clean. I know Baron Corbin beat Roman in 2019, as did Shane and Eric Rowan. What a fucking motley crew. But none of those guys beat Roman clean. Bobby Lashley did at Extreme Rules 2018, 5 years ago. The last person to beat Roman clean 5 years ago. So running that back would be great, and they had great chemistry back then. They never had a rubber match. Bobby won that first one. Roman won the rematch on Raw to become number one contender that year to the Universal Championship at SummerSlam. They never had a third match. They had a triple threat on Raw about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, that Roman won, I think, by pinning Bobby, actually. But they never had a rematch one-on-one. So I would run that back at some point, but again, the problem is that Roman does not work any of these shows until like the Rumble. We're not going to see him again for another 4 or 5 months, which is fucking ridiculous. Their next question, why do Becky Lynch and Rhea Ripley feel like afterthoughts right now? Becky is stuck in this lame Trish feud, while Rhea is just holding the championship like a prop since WrestleMania. What happens at Payback with them? They need each other to feel important again. Becky's probably off Payback. It sounds like, I think Becky and Trish is happening next week on Raw in a steel cage match. So she will not be a Payback. I could see Rhea and Raquel happening at Payback. I was surprised it didn't happen at SummerSlam, but they wanted to stretch it out more. I don't think Raquel's actually hurt. I think that's just a storyline injury. So I would honestly be surprised if they didn't do that match at Payback in a couple of weeks. They got a couple more Raws to set it up. They'll probably announce it in the next week or two. Rhea did not defend. I mean, she's been on these shows as part of the Judgment Day stuff, but she's not been in action on a pay-per-view since Night of Champions, which was over 3 months ago by the time Payback comes around in early September. So she should absolutely be in action defending on that show against Raquel and beating her, obviously. I wouldn't say that they feel like afterthoughts. Rhea's all over Raw. Her championship run might be an afterthought, but Rhea herself is not an afterthought. She's all over Raw. She is wrestling. She just faced Indy Hartwell on Monday night, so it's not like she's not wrestling really at all. Becky's all over these shows as well. The Trish feud has been lame. I agree with that. They need to move on from that shit pretty quickly. I applaud the fact they had a non-title feud and they tried. It just didn't really meet our expectations, and the matches haven't been amazing. The character work hasn't been amazing. The mic work hasn't been amazing. It's time to just move on. But you were right when you said, I think Rhea and Becky need each other to feel important. That is probably the next big feud for the Raw Women's Division, is Becky and Rhea. It's fresh. They had one match in NXT years ago, one-on-one, and that was it. And I think it ended in DQ anyway. They can match those two women up, and it would be a great, I would say a Mania feud. I don't know if that's the Mania match. They probably need to do it before then. They probably would need to go towards that either at the end of the year, early 2024. I don't know if they could wait until Mania for Becky versus Rhea. And Becky should not be beating Rhea Ripley anyway. I don't know how they get to Bianca and Rhea. They teased that last year. They might be holding off on that until even later down the road. But Becky and Rhea would be a fine consolation prize. I just don't think Becky should be beating Rhea for that championship. At the Average Grunt from Twitter, last two questions are from him, the first one being, if a champion gets counted out or disqualified in a championship match, do you consider it a successful title defense? Is not losing the belt enough, or do they actually have to win the match? Now, to me, that's a championship defense, because when I hear an unsuccessful championship defense, I think, well, they lost the championship. I agree. Listen, getting themselves disqualified or counted out is dumb, and it's not exactly a successful way of retaining the championship, but by pure definition of the word retain, they did hold on to and they did retain the title. They didn't lose the championship. It may not have been by pinfall or submission, but they did retain the championship. Unless they lost the championship by DQ or countout, which happens sometimes in certain matches, then yeah, but most matches, that's not the case. So it is a technical way of saying it is a successful championship defense, and it is lame, but it is a title defense nonetheless. So yes, I do count disqualifications and DQs as title defenses, successful title defenses. Barely, because again, they lost, but they didn't lose the championship, and therefore they defended the title and they retained it. So it does count in a way. And his second question, hot or cold? I find it ridiculous how people are retroactively treating the old women's championship as a world title. I'm sorry, but it never was and shouldn't be considered one now just because the new ones are. I haven't really heard that, but I assume you're talking about that the new championships, the WWE Women's title and the Women's World title, are now world championships. I don't know when they were classified as world. I mean, really, they've always been world championships for the women because they're the only championships they have to fight for. So really, for the women, they are the world title. They've never called them that in WWE up until recently. But would I constitute like the old WWE Women's Championship a world title retroactively? No. I mean, what's changed? But so here's the thing: the perception of the title hasn't really changed from like when Fabulous Moolah held it. I mean, that was a world title for the women because that was the biggest championship they had for the women, and she held it. So nothing's really changed. It's not like they have a mid-card title now and they have a world title now, whatever. They've always been at the same level. I mean, the championships do feel more important now than they did 15 years ago, obviously. Would I count the Divas title as a Divas World Championship? No, but it was the top prize for a decent amount of time in the WWE Women's division. It's all semantics. It really doesn't matter to me too much, regardless, whether it's a world title or not. I mean, what does it matter even if it's classified as a world championship? But WWE very rarely retroactively changes anything. So I guess, no, it would not count. As far as the old championships would not be world titles because they weren't then and they're not now. If they are now, if they are now, then they're world championships from whenever they changed and made that changeover in the last couple of years, months, whatever. From that point forward, they're now world championships. At that point, they weren't. For example, I think the NXT championship, technically, I think is a world title. I think it still counts as a world championship, even though it's a fucking developmental show. I mean, I know it was an important prize in like 2018, 2019, I get it. But right now, is it a world championship on a developmental show? I wouldn't say so. Like fucking Carmella being champion is great, but it's not the main roster. It's not the same thing. So anyway, I think they made that distinction that NXT is a world championship in like 2021. I forgot when it was, but they started calling it a world championship a couple of years ago. WWE, for example, even started allowing the NXT championship to be a choice for the Royal Rumble winner a couple of years ago, like starting in 2021. Does that mean the NXT championship was always a world title dating back to 2012? No. Because it was more of a world championship in 2020, 2021 than it was in 2012 when only like 10 people were watching the show. Therefore, applying that logic to the women's championship, that title changed. The WWE women's titles have not, because they've always been the biggest prize and they've always been like the focal point of that division, regardless of how women's wrestling was viewed. But I still would not retroactively make that a world championship if it's only a world title now. I agree with that. Thank you guys for tuning into the show per usual. I always appreciate it. Be sure to send in your questions by tweeting me on the Twitter machine at WrestleRant with the hashtag AskGSM. Find me on Facebook as well, facebook.com/Graham.GSM.Matthews. Drop a comment on the post I usually put up on Tuesday nights, if not in the wall itself. And last but certainly not least, drop your question down below in the comment section on this very video. I'll include your question in next week's edition. Have an awesome one, folks. Enjoy the rest of your week. I'm Graham GSM Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.